I swear, what can you say about this section of One Piece that hasn't already been said? It is fantastic. Oda is hitting on every single cylinder, every single chapter. Man, and even to see the five elders, or more specifically Jay Garcia, do something so crazy. Like I was so wrong about these characters, man. I kept talking about how I don't think they're gonna be too strong, they're parts of Emu and they're gonna be weaker characters and they're not gonna have that much power to them. Now I did kind of go back in it a bit. I was like, Samurai Gandhi's gonna be pretty cool, but I'm so surprised at the level of combat experience they are at because I thought with the God Knights introduced, they're going to be a lot weaker. But now the world government seems way, way stacked. And we'll get into that right now. For one, he does a feat I've not seen from any other characters besides Marco, which is quite interesting to me. He heals his stab wound. Now, I don't know what all this is about. Like, maybe I didn't talk about it in the last chapter review, which was really stupid of me. That made me realize I had to start taking notes. The panagram that he used to summon his zone form of some sorts. And I think that might draw from Emu's energy, like have a somewhat similar format to what I was originally saying, where he draws from Emu's energy using that panagram symbol, and that's how he was able to heal himself. So in a way, it might have been Emu healing him. And I could see there being a thing where, Gear 5 is the only way he can be actually attacked because Nika is the only thing that can kind of fight against Emu. I could see something like that happen, but we're gonna go back to that later, right? So basically, Bonnie stabs Jay Garcia, and then we get moving to a panel where we see him heal himself. But we also see a wonderful panel because we see how when he's talking to Vegapunk, he's like, "You've really betrayed us, Vegapunk. I'm very disappointed." And then Bonnie goes, "You killed my father," and he's like, "You're on about Kuma, aren't you, Bonnie?" We see that Garcia was really the reason that Kuma got his memories taken away, and that it puts Vegapunk in a much better light for two main reasons. One, because we see that him keeping Kuma's memories around wasn't just because, oh, I want to experiment with them. Oh, that's gonna be great. Yes, yes, yes. It was more so I want to make sure my friend can still go back to normal at some point in his life. And it does make me think we'll see Kuma show up, but I'm actually more excited for some other stuff that I think we might see first. But it puts Vegapunk, he's actually going against the world government to help his friend. So Vegapunk's a way more, kind character than originally shown. There was a lot more grey to him in the beginning. He's kind of getting that usual Oda niceness put into him now. But it will be interesting to see if that's only because he separated the seven parts himself. I don't know. And this is part of the reason why I feel like the Gorosei also have to be parts of Emu to a degree, is because it's going to parallel Vegapunk, because Vegapunk is like considered a threat because of his immense knowledge, and Emu's going to have immense knowledge because of his knowledge of the voice entry and his abilities, right? So to have him be that evil version of Vegapunk, be that all powerful being, or that person who holds all the knowledge, I think would be an interesting parallel. But also, I think it's very important that he ensures Bonnie's survival. I think it's very clear now that if the Gorosei forced Vegapunk to take away Kuma's memories, Vegapunk was probably the reason Bonnie's still alive. He probably did a favor for his friend and made Bonnie out to be useful through the Seraphim program, which might explain why he made so many concessions, like allowing the elders to have full control over the Seraphim by being like, oh, we need Bonnie to age them up and stuff. And so maybe that was why he did that, so he can ensure her survival. So it really paints Vegapunk in a much better light, this chapter, and I think that's what Oda's doing heading into this flashback, which we get into later. We're finally getting God Valley, lads. It's actually insane to see, to find, like, if Oda pulls this off well, it could be the best arc in the series, because we put immediately after this, besides a few things with Kizaru and Luffy, we get straight into a God Valley flashback. But I want to go into the Luffy and Kizaru stuff first, though, because a lot of people, I see it a lot where people are like, oh, Kizaru, that's a bad look for Kizaru. I don't think this is a bad look for Kizaru at all. Luffy drew with an admiral, right? And Luffy's considered a Yonko at this point in the story. And if nothing else, Kizaru was better off. You know what I mean? At least he's still talking. He's like, oh yeah, sorry boss, just can't move right now. You know how it is? Luffy's completely out of it. He's completely worn down. We're seeing that Gear 5 really is like an exhaustion level from Gear 4 to another level. Like, it's not really something you can abuse, which I think is quite interesting. After this chapter, particularly when we see the full extent of the exhaustion of Gear 5, I do think the no gear theory that I was pouting for ages, 2 years ago probably? Like, I was shouting from the rooftops about how by end of series, Luffy isn't going to be using any of his gears. You know what I mean? He's going to stand alone as a base Luffy. I do think we're going to see that. Maybe not in the exact form, because I think Oda loves Gear 5 in the sense where he just wants to be able to use it all the time because it's fun to draw with. But I do think what might happen is Luffy has to be able to fight with these top tiers such as Shanks and Garp in his base form, because otherwise he's not there yet. I think that's shown Luffy's limit. He is, in terms of attack potency, he is on the level of Garp and Shanks, but he's not there with longevity. And I said this with the Garp versus Luffy fight. That's why I think Garp would win overall. But I also do think that Gear 5 is still going to be a player because it's going to put him a level above them, right? By end of series, or by the time he's fighting Emu, Luffy's going to be on the level of Garp and Shanks. And then Gear 5 is going to be what puts him above all these characters. His base power is going to be where he is right now. And then once he goes Gear 5, he's just going to have that imagination buff. And he's going to be able to fight against characters like Emu or Figureland, who are a level above the characters we're already seeing. And it's interesting to see this God Valley flashback now, actually going straight into this, because we get a callback to when Whitebeard was like, oh, when I see your face, it reminds me of the scars I got from long ago. And that's to think Oda was planning all this for so many years. It really feels like everything's coming together with the recent chapters so far. And I honestly can't wait. He's really just getting me so excited. And I know I say this every single time I talk about One Piece, but it just gets me so excited talking about it all the time. But with Luffy again, going back to Gear 5, because we'll talk about, I want to give the God Valley flashback more conversation later on, but back to Gear 5. I do think this is a good way to set it up, because although Oda wants to have his own fun, he still wants the story to be coherent. So he's having Gear 5 be sort of this negative thing. But I also like what that could play into, because obviously we're talking about the Roger illness that Roger got. And I like the idea that maybe their illnesses are not the same. Maybe, Roger's illness is from something else. Maybe he just got sick. And Luffy's illness is from the fact that he overuses Gear 5 and it's messing with his heart. Or maybe he gets the same illness as well, and he's worsely affected by it by Roger than Roger was, because he's strained from Gear 5 as well. So then Chopper has to not only solve, Luffy's heart palpitations basically, but also the illness that Roger got, right? And I think that's going to be really interesting for Chopper's character if he decides to turn Chopper into an actual compelling character once again. But I think it's really good for Oda to set these limitations for Gear 5 so we can still see compelling fights with characters below Luffy's level. I really love it. But back to the Gorosei real quick. I'm just not expecting them to be as strong as they were. And you could argue Jay might be the weakest Gorosei, which puts this into major perspective, because Sanji couldn't do nothing. He didn't even get close to him. He was just whacked back by a barrier. Like Jay thinks he's fucking Gojo or something, man. He's like, nope, no boy, no, you can't get near me, bro. And that was the last thing we saw before Bonnie gets crushed, and then we move into the God Valley flashback. And honestly, Oda really knows how to make us realize I'm the king of emotions, baby. I've got you down. You can't. I'll get you to feel something immediately. 3 pages, the same length as the Kuma as the Kaido flashback, and I had to be caring for Kuma. That Kuma crying panel was on an entirely different level. You could tell Oda enjoyed drawing that, man. It was just so good. That felt like old school One Piece again. It was like, oh yeah, I love to see that. Like on the level of the Robin crying scene. I love that, right? I know I talk about it all the time, but that Robin, when Robin basically says, you know, calls for her mother, and you see her crying when she finds out that Olivia is her mother. Man, that I felt like when that gets animated, that's gonna be the same level of power because that those. I still remember that scene, and I think the way Oda drew this, man, I think it's gonna have the same effect. Obviously, you're not gonna have the same build up if I was actually caring for Kuma to that level, but again, manga readers definitely will because we'll get the God Valley flashback. But anime onlys might have to wait a while. But I'd say on rewatch, people are gonna absolutely adore this scene. But I loved it, I really did. And I like the idea that they're focusing on Kuma's race of a Brewsker. I'm just going to call it Brewsker because I can't pronounce it. So the Brewsker race, right? The Buska Brewsker, boys. Oda's bringing his Irish back in. The trash bin. That's what it is. The trash bin race. I'm sorry. Isn't that what a Buska Brewsker is? Or is that like a gift? I can't remember. Some fluent Irish speakers are going to get that in the chat. I can't remember. The Buska Brewsker race. That's what I'm going to call it from now on. The Buska Brewsker. Let's go. All right. Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting race because then we are basically told what Whitebeard's race is, right? Because this is what Whitebeard was by the looks of things. I think that's really cool because we get to see Whitebeard here and we see a free Buska Brewsker and a chained Buska Brewsker in Kuma, and they're probably going to highlight the differences between the two and how Whitebeard had the ability to choose between sides, whereas Kuma doesn't, and Kuma had to be freed. And I think actually this backstory, setting up God Valley and having Kuma be in God Valley and having, you know, Figureland be there and everything like that is fantastic because it allows for Dragon to be Kuma's Nika, right? And that's the most important thing because we see here Kuma talking about, you know, Nika brings the sun. He allows you to go out to sea. He brings you out to sea and brings you freedom, right? That's all they talk about with Nika, right? And to have Dragon possibly be a marine who defects because, you know, he sees that, you know, the Celestial Dragons just came to God Valley for the sole purpose of taking out humans. I do not agree with this. No matter how high up he is in the Marines, he just can't agree with this. And I actually think it answers a big question because this chapter brings up the question of why would Garp and, you know, Roger defend the Celestial Dragons if they're being so bad, and is Zebek a good character? Now maybe whatever Zebek is doing isn't good either, and there could be a lot to that. But I think particularly with Garp, I'd say this could be shock. Do you know what I mean? Because we're probably going to see the reason Dragon got that worst criminal mark right here and now, right? For God Valley, he might have been a Marine, he probably defected, he protected Kuma, and he might have harmed the Celestial Dragon to an irreparable degree. Maybe it was Figureland himself, or maybe it was St. Garling, not St. Garling, Jay Garcia, because doesn't Jay Garcia have like some scars? And you know, there's been a lot of talk about him recently. He has a few scars. Oh no, he already has the scar in his eye in the flashback, so it's definitely not that. So it's probably going to be Figureland. I'm not going to look back at Figureland's thing, but I think that is going to be it. And Garp is so confused and so his head is just, he's in his own head that he has to default back to what he knows, which is just protect the Celestial Dragons. And I think this, because Garp, we have a lot of existential dread for Garp with what happened with Ace, what's happened with Aokiji. And I think we see with this, right, that he goes back to what he knows when he's raising Ace and Luffy. He goes back to what he knows when he's raising Aokiji. The only character where he takes everything he's learned is with Koby, where he teaches Koby the grays of the world, and Koby is an altruistic guy, so generally he takes a good option. But he does teach Koby the grays of the world and what to care about and what not to care about. So Koby is the only successful time Garp has raised a disciple because he learned from the trauma that God Valley and that Marineford have given him. And I think that's going to be fantastic for Garp, and I can't wait to see that executed. And if I'm right, boys, if I'm right, I'm looking forward to it. I can't lie. But yeah, I think having Dragon be the Sun God Nika for Kuma would just be a brilliant plotline, especially because if we cut back because there's talk about, Bonnie's being like, in the flashback, she's like, can I be free as well? Dad. And then Kuma's like, yes, Bonnie, you can. Like, to have Luffy be recharged and come back in, and you hear the drums of liberation, and then all of a sudden Bonnie looks up to the sky and she sees in the sun, Luffy in the iconic pose, which I'm just doing this one, the iconic pose, right, where it's like and then he goes and he just slams Jay Garcia to the ground. I think that would be perfect in nearly every single way. To bring it all full circle, father like son, have that first proper father son parallel through God Valley. I honestly think Oda might do something completely different, but I honestly think that's a fantastic idea. I don't know. I think if Oda pulls this off, man, it really could be one of the best arcs in the series, possibly the best. Like, I'm watching the anime right now. The anime episode where they came back, after recovering from the fight with Kaido just came out. And that stuff is insane. Like, I love watching the anime, right? The anime has been so fun week to week. It's Sunday mornings. I get up at like 8:30 on a Sunday morning, and I pop on the episode, and I'm just sitting there with my toast for breakfast and my cup of tea, just watching the episode. Man, that's some of the best stuff. I'm not gonna lie, and it's just so funny. They had Ashura Zoro just eating meat. It was hilarious. And I think that's, I don't know, the anime definitely, I do prefer the anime for Wano, 100%. I just love the anime. I don't know, I just have a love for the anime, and I really can't wait for some of this stuff to get animated. But the manga's paneling is getting back to a form where I'm really happy to read it, because Wano was really difficult for me. I've tried to read Wano to catch up because of chapter 1000. It was really difficult initially because the paneling was so different. Now I did get used to it, but man, Egghead's kind of bringing that back where it's super easy to read, and I love that. I really do. But yeah, I'm hoping this is like at least 10, 15 chapters. Like, this should not be less than the Oden flashback. It should be more, if not, if not way longer. I could see it being like the rest of the year. Like, we've got, how many chapters do we get? There's gonna be only 30 chapters out this year. What was the first chapter of the year? I don't know, but I do think we might get it at least for the rest of the year, if not a bit over. I'd say maybe until February next year, maybe, or something like that. How many chapters is that? So we get a break. I don't know. It's probably like 9, 10 chapters left, and then 4 more chapters after that. 4, 5, 6. I think that's reasonable enough, to have a proper God Valley flashback to really bring in the importance of this. It might even end up being its own standalone arc. Imagine God Valley as its own standalone arc with a proper flashback, proper character developments, all that type of stuff. It would be fantastic. Our first look into the true abilities of Roger and the crew, it would be unbelievable. It really would. And I think Oda's going to pull it off. I really do. I truly believe Oda is going to make probably the best backstory in anime history with this God Valley flashback. I really do. And I think if we have it where there's so many different, characters in play, and there's so many different, allegiances, I think the most important thing is if he makes it in a believable way for Roger and Garp to fight for the Celestial Dragons, like whatever reason that is, it has to be something insane. And I honestly think like that is going to be what makes this arc. If it's a bullshit reason, it's gonna turn this arc into crap. But if they do it right, this will be insane. Oh, and we've got another week. We've got a week break after this, but we are introduced. One last thing I want to say before I finish up talking about the flashback. We are introduced to a character called Ginny, which is pretty obviously, Bonnie's mother. But I wonder if we get our only proper like biological father child relationship, because a lot of it's like adoptive fathers. Our only proper father child relationship with Kuma and Bunny. You know what I mean? Because we got a lot of inherited will, but we always see that biological parents are terrible. That's the big message of One Piece. Biological parents are terrible. With Judge, Dragon, all of them, they abandon their kids. But to have Kuma actually be a good dad, and to be Bonnie's biological dad might be an interesting, an interesting way to have it. Because it's always like, oh, biological mothers are great, but the biological dads, them deadbeats, bro, them deadbeats. You know what I mean? So it might be nice for a little change of pace. I don't know. That's just me, though. Let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments below. I absolutely loved it, but I'm sure a lot of people had problems with this chapter, and I want to hear about them. Let's have a discussion. Let me know what you liked about it, because I am super excited about the upcoming arcs of One Piece. And with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe for more content from me, and hope you have a nice day. Cheers, everyone.